I may break it up and go, 2 300s with a minute rest or something like that. But the goal is to be able to have 600 meters worth of work in that session. At the bottom, I'm putting the total volume of that workout session, and you'll see how those progress from higher volume down to lower volume in the season. Then we come back on Tuesday, and we'll do acceleration work at the beginning of the training session. Acceleration ladders, or using the mini hurdles, wicket drills to work on rhythm, to work on tempo, ground contact time. And then the workout itself might be 7 200s. And again, that percentage, 77 to 80%, because we're going to start there, but then as we work through the season, we want to get down to fewer 200s, but be able to run those 200s at a faster pace. So 1,400 meters for the tempo work. Then we'll come back and we'll do speed development. So like Ryan was talking about, I do a fast paw drill, which is just a stationary quick paw drill. And then we'll do sled work and 3-point stance, 3-point starts from the stance. 50 meters, sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's only 30 meters. But again, I'm still being able to work in that speed aspect, and this is week 3, and we're doing, sort of full speed acceleration type of work. And then I'll come back on Thursday with a special endurance 2, which for me is, sort of that's the monster workout. That's the one that's going to build the lactic acid. It's going to get the legs burning. And the kids are going to, be walking around behind the bleachers to throw up in the middle. But that will help progress down, and you'll see as we go through the season, I end up getting rid of those workouts. So early on, it's an important piece, but it starts to move from that down to speed endurance, and then you'll see down to really race event specific things. And then Friday will be an active recovery day. Saturday, early on, I limit, because this volume, because the training is so heavy, I tell the kids, hey, we're basically training through the meet this week. We're not concerned with your meet performance in terms of the time. We'll have 1 or 2 technical things that we're trying to work on. Maybe it's just a block start, maybe it's good posture, whatever it is. So I really only have them do maybe 2 events. And then if they're in a jump event, I make them go, I prefer they go from a short approach. So again, they're a little fatigued, so from everything we did. And then that shorter approach slows them down, so that then they can work on technical things that take off or flight mechanics.
So for us, as you can see, our focus isn't so much on the energy system development, the running. Our focus is more on skill-based speed acceleration. Monday workouts are your most important workouts. Whatever you want to emphasize, that needs to be done on Monday. Okay? Because most of us have Sundays off. We don't train our kids on Sundays. They go to church, whatever, temple, whatever. Okay? So Monday needs to be your most important day. And you will notice there's a lot more verbiage up here, because there are specific goals that we want these athletes to hit. And we will be very much in their ear about these things. So when your athletes come to practice, they should know what they're doing in those different aspects. And you'll see, this is based off a 60-meter race model. Okay? We're not even really talking about yet getting to the 100. So you have to be comfortable with that your kids might not be ready to run a complete 100 in your first 3 weeks of training. So that first meet, you may not run them. They may be on a relay, something like that, and that's okay. But we want to develop those skills. Tuesday, they're going to be tired if they hit the percentages that you want them to hit. Their neurological system will be fried. It takes 48 hours to come back from that. Okay? They're not going to be as sore necessarily or fatigued, because you're not going into the glycolytic energy system, you're not going into speed endurance. They're going to be fatigued. So what do? So we have what's called a tempo day. So it's speed, and it's kind of like aerobic fitness training for sprinters, but it's not necessarily really aerobic. And for me, early on in the year, because I'm so worried about injuries, we do what's called 50-50-50. So 50%, well, not 50%, but 70% for the first, 50 meters, which really for them will be kind of like the 50% at the end of the year. Then the next 50 meters, they get another cone, they're at 80%. The last 50 meters, they're at 90%. Okay? And we have 2 minutes recovery. It's very short. Okay? Because we want them to get used to being tired. But the reason why we change those percentages is they can be more aggressive as they move through. And you also want to make sure, like when people get hurt, it's usually at the very beginning or when they're really, really tired at the very end. So what we want to do is try to clear out that dust that they've got in their legs. We want them to be prepared and ready for that. Okay? Then, because that energy system, that neurological system, okay, hasn't recovered, it takes 48 hours, you gotta be comfortable with kind of having an active recovery day, where your athletes, your sprinters aren't doing a lot. And some of the kids are distance runners and doing other events, are like, what the heck, why do these guys get so much time off? Well, you still need to have them to do something. Hurdle mobility, really great. Using the rubber bands as they talked about and doing kind of the monster walks with those, great. But you also need to have other things for them to do. You need to watch their races from the past, or you need to have them watch athletes that you want them to model in terms of the technical things that you're doing here, okay? And have that highlight reel start to get wired in their head so that they can see what they're doing. So that day is still really important, but it's gonna have a different focus to allow them to get their body recovered. Then what you've got is another type of speed workout, a lactic system workout. Here's where we've got those sled drives that I talked about before, 10% body weight. You've got a series of 8, and again, they're gonna be tired. If you do this right, they're gonna be very, very tired. Then on Friday, you're backing that day up, so we're not going as long because they're gonna be tired from the accumulation of work over the week, but it's a similar workout with a similar recovery. Then on Saturday, because you're not racing in those first 3 weeks, you're gonna model a race, okay? So that's why you have those 250s. Well, you don't want them to necessarily run the actual race distance that they're gonna run, because then they get wired like, oh man, in practice, I can only run 24 seconds, but my PR last year was 22.5. Yeah, that's true. So you want to use odd distances. You know what they're doing, and you have times to know how good that is, but they don't really know. And then you give them 20 minutes recovery. That's a long recovery. So one of the things I don't have in here, because we just don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but you need to have them do something in the middle in that 20 minutes. If they're doing just like 4 times 40 build-ups or kind of run-outs or something like that, just to kind of wake the body up so that when they step on the track again, they're not dead tired. You might want to do yoga or massage, depending on how elite the athlete is. They might already have money, they can go get a massage. Yoga is something easy that everybody can do. Just pop in a YouTube video and have them hit the exalted warrior position and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of a fun way to just kind of end practice, relax the mind, get ready for Sunday today.
Now as we go through, I won't spend a whole lot of time on these slides like Ryan will, because for me, we did 5,500 meters worth of essentially intense volume work throughout the week. So when it comes to warm-ups and additional drills and things like that, I don't really put a whole lot of that stuff in. My basic warm-up is usually between 1,200 and 1,600 meters, and I kind of keep it pretty consistent throughout the year. So on a speed day, we'll do something a little more dynamic. On a strength day, so if we're running 75 to 80%, it'll be something more of gradual type build-ups as opposed to dynamic skips and plyo warm-ups, that kind of thing. Drill-wise, I keep the same drills every single day. Early on, we start with A and B marches as opposed to skips, depending on the groups. The older kids, I usually break them down, and early on, first week, we're not going to do an A skip or a B skip. We are going to do just a march, just a standing march to make sure we get some of those things in. But on the speed day, I'll throw in a foot fire for a fast leg, 1, 2, 3, and a quick leg jump, acceleration ladders, an acceleration drill that I do on the wall, and then again, fast pause, just stationary quick pause drills. And so I do those things on a speed day, and although it's not as intense as the entire workout that Ryan is doing, they're still getting in their speed work in other ways, maybe not necessarily on just the track intervals.
So this ancillary stuff that I do is part of the workout. And so when kids warm up, like, oh, I'll go do a couple laps and stretch up. No. This, you have to be coaching the warm up. You have to be coaching the drills in a short to long session, because those drills are part of your workout. So when you look at the training that I might have up there, like, that's not that much. Then you look at this takes like an hour to get through. Okay, so this is part of your workout. It's the neurological aspect of your workout. Okay, so when we do this stuff, I rotate. So what I do, each phase that you guys will see through, I have 2 different packages that I rotate. So on Monday I'll do this warm up, Tuesday I do this warm up, Wednesday I do the other warm up, and I just rotate that through. And then as we move through that, I also have a set of drills. We have a package of that. Now why do I do that? That 48-hour principle. You want the athlete to see something consistent enough that they know how to do it, they know the verbiage, they know the language, they know the expectations. But you don't want them to see it so much that they become docile and it doesn't wake them up, it doesn't stimulate them, it doesn't get them thinking about what they're going to do. So you want to hit that sweet spot between them knowing what they're doing, but always having to pay attention. Okay, that idea of concentration. Okay, that's a good word. Instead of paying attention, like pay attention to me. Concentration is you concentrate, you focus, putting it on them. I love that yesterday that we said that. And when you look at the warm-ups, you're not going to be out there just running a whole bunch of laps. We do a couple laps, but then as we move through the season, we become more and more specific where you have an element of speed all the time. Because what are those distance runners going to do? I got one of my athletes back here, I'm going to call her out. She hated the warm-up, okay? She would, it was like constantly one of these battles. But as we move through some of this other stuff, she loved that. She'd do that no problem because that fits what they like to do, where they feel good. It makes sense to them. They can buy in.
So plyos and strength training, again for me, I do plyos twice a week on the speed day. It is more of in-place jumps, more of sort of more explosive type of work. We will work to be able to do depth jumps, heavy box jumps, maybe some bounding, things like that. And I usually start with a little bit of stuff before the workout, so initial explosion type of work to simulate block clearance, things like that, and then stuff we'll do after workouts. So the plyo box is usually early on, then we'll start with lower boxes. On my strength days, I kind of consider those rhythm / continuous contact type of days. So if we were running repeat 200s, or if we were running 500 and some 300s, we're going to, instead of doing something completely explosive, we're going to follow with that rhythm. So I usually do cone hops or mini hurdles, something like that. Strength training wise, this is my accumulation time. So just as the running workouts start with kind of larger volume and lower intensities, the weights do the same thing. So there's leg circuits, the squats are working up only to 70%. We do chin-ups and pull-ups for time as opposed to reps. And then same thing, bench works, up to 65, 70%. And then again, for upper body stuff, we are doing more circuit type of work early on to match what we're doing on the track.
So as we talked about before, we've got those in-place jumps. We start with like one set of 30 seconds, and then we add, which again, we was talking to you guys about that same methodology. I stole it from it. Okay, so there you go. We as coaches and teachers, you have to be good crooks in that regard and take the best stuff you see and try to figure out a way you can put it into your program where it makes sense. The weight room stuff, your kids will not see all this language. That's intimidating, right? This is for you guys to understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. Okay? Now, that's a lot of lifting. But because you're not doing the big, huge extended intervals with the huge recoveries, you can get this stuff done where maybe in a long to short system, you might not be able to. Now, if you have a hard time getting these workouts in, then just split it up. Do your upper body stuff on one day, Tuesday do your lower body stuff, and then just rotate it that way through. When we're in the regular season, we lift twice a week on a really, really good week, okay? The off season is kind of where you can get a lot of this lifting done, which is why it's in the general preparation phase and not later. We'll lift, 5 days a week, 4 days a week in the winter, okay? But they're doing something different on those days.
Okay. So now we're week 8 of the season. So now we will both be in our competitive phase. For me, this is where training really starts to get fun. Because like I said, we've done 7 weeks of kind of laying some groundwork. So now we can really get in training that is going to affect what we're going to do in a race. So if things shift to what the race is going to feel like, those energy systems that really replicate what it feels like to run a 200, to run a 100, to run a 400. So the speed days, we've progressed up to 93%. The strength days, we've progressed up to 87%. So now, we're still focusing on some of this same energy system, the longer lactate work, which you'll see how the intervals change, the volume goes down, the intensity goes up. Instead of some of the lactic acid type work, so the 300s, things like that, now we're going to sub in, we're done with those, so now we're going to sub in speed endurance work. And then I'm still going to keep the tempo work with tempo. You'll see it increases from a percentage to what I call, what I always refer to the back end pace of a 400. So whenever we want them to finish the last 200 of their quarter in, that's the pace that I'm going to really work off of my tempo.
So in this, now we're moving into, again, even more specific things. So now they can drive out of the blocks. They can do that raw. Now what you want to do is start adding to, okay, now that you've got this kind of time, now let's see if we can have the step pattern that makes sense for what you want them to be goal pace wise. So wicket drills and stuff like that, you look up Vince Anderson on the internet, he's got this stuff all broken down of where you can place the marks on the track for them to have the athlete hit the spot. So now we're not just driving, now we're driving with goals. Okay, so you're adding that in as part of it. Remember, the drive phase is always there. It's always an important part of the short to long system. Stride rate and stride frequency. When you hear the guru guys talk, they always talk about stride rate and stride frequency. Well, that's true. So now instead of just coming in and flying and doing a flying sprint, now I'm yelling out things. There's no cones anymore. They have to react to what I'm saying. So I'll say frequency, rate, frequency, rate. And we'll see that that skill ends up becoming something later that will actually even do with the drills at the beginning of practice. So frequency is, we want them, man, they gotta spin those wheels, right? High RPMs, right? Frequency, okay? Then when we talk about, stride length, then we're talking about, hey, we want them to extend. So when stride length, then they should be looking like they're opening up. And you're yelling those things out, and you want to visually see those things happen as they run, okay? Strength training will be velocity-based, which means, or maximum, which we already talked about. But velocity-based is you're no longer really worried about the weight. You're worried about how fast it takes them to get through the sets. Okay, so once that bar is unwrapped, the watch stops as they drop the bar. And then the goal is no longer the weight, the goal is the speed of the contraction, and then the kids, their partner has a stopwatch and then they record that. Okay, we call that FAP, which is fast as possible. Applied metrics centered around hurdle jumps, box jumps, or depth jumps. So now we're adding barriers. So we're not just doing this anymore. Now we're, boom, exploding up, getting over barriers, jumping, coming off of barriers, catching ourselves, exploding up. You're adding another layer of intensity, making it more difficult, short to long, even with your jumps.
Okay, so like I said, we've done 7 weeks of work. So now our volume is going to come down, but the intensity of the workout is going to go up. So I still call that a special endurance 1 workout, the longer lactic work on Monday, but instead of a 600 or 500 at an 80%, the 200 meters of volume, now the volume goes down, but the intensity goes up. So instead of a 600 or 500 at 80%, we'll run 450s at 87%. Again, I can still keep, it's good rest. It's 13, and for me, based on the athlete and how they're, how they look throughout the workouts, I may adjust these as long as I know kind of what I'm working for. And like I said, the tempo work, I start to add in. The reason I have these 2 days back to back is because the tempo is an extension of what they did on Monday. And so see, that for me is current back end pace. So my tempo work is, we don't really want to do anything slower than what they would finish their last 200 of 400. And so I use current back end pace when we get to the middle of the season, then at the end of the season we'll get to their goal back end pace. And so that's really the slowest type of effort that we'll do in the practice. And then I always like to end with something, something fast.